Okay, okay. As though people can't get enough of the Michael movie,
Well,
we've
don't stop
decided
till they get enough. Don't stop till they get enough.
I'll start to get enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have decided to add our two spins. But welcome, Akanji Orwin, as people know him as AK. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm jet lagged. I'm heavily jet lagged. So
So
my
you're still
apologies
in
in
this?
advance.
You're still stateside.
I am, but I went to Chicago like on the weekend to see my sister, and then I ended up kind of doing the whole pilgrimage to 2300 Jackson Street because it's right around the corner from where she lives. It's about 15 minutes away. So my
From
brother-in-law,
Chicago.
yeah, my brother-in-law surprised me that like I think the whole family were in on it. Like they sort of made out that they were driving me to one of their businesses, and they were like, "Oh, we just wanted you to come see the new business." And I was like, "Guys, I'm on a real time thing here. Like, I don't have time. I just want to see my niece, my nephews, and chill." They're like, "No, no, no, no." And I didn't want to. I was really getting upset. Like I was seething. And then my brother-in-law just parked, and he was like, "Get out." And I was like, "This doesn't look like a business." And I saw the plaque of like the MJ plaque that I think they put up in like '09. And I'd always, as a kid, seen pictures of that house and sort of, obviously, the Jacksons album in '89, '90 was named after, 2300
Yeah,
Jackson
yeah,
Street.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like so it was just and I signed the board. There's these boards that they put up, and I'm sure they replaced them on a weekly basis where you could sign your name.
Wow.
And it's like it actually put into context a lot about the Jackson family and where they came from and the fires that Michael and the siblings were forged from. Because that house is the size of a garage. Like it's literally the size of a garage. And I'd always heard stories like, oh my God, it was like a 2-bedroom house and da 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 da. No, the house humble is not the word. And then when you realize the neighborhood of Gary, Indiana, that they're from, it's like a very black working class neighborhood. Like my brother-in-law and I drove past like a black biker club. There was a club, and it was like you sort of looked like a little hole in the wall club, and there was just bikers outside. Thought, wow, is this Hell's Angels? No, it was black bikers. And then the house is backed by a like sports field. So literally it's like a cul-de-sac that they live in.
Mm.
And then there's a sports field right next to it where, because Jackie was a baseball guy when he was a kid, as was Tito. A side note, that's why, Tito in the early pictures, publicity for the pictures of the Jackson 5, Tito has a tooth missing. I think that was
Mm.
from baseball. He lost that from baseball. So
Okay.
the brothers were very heavily involved in sports. But that aside, there's something spiritual about going to that house, particularly
Wow.
after having, seen the film, and I've seen it twice now, and being, for any of the fans, there's a real kind of connectivity to the whole Jackson thing when you go there and you realize that them making it out of Gary, Indiana, and out of that house was like a miracle. And to where they made it is like, well, a beautiful miracle. So big up. I know people criticizing Joe Jackson for various reasons. Big him up, man. Can't have
Yeah.
Michael without Joe. Can't have Michael without Catherine. You needed them both.
Mm.
They did an
Yeah.
incredible job. Those parents, man. They did an incredible job.
Yeah. No, definitely. Ezekiel, welcome. Red Golden Child, welcome. Anyone else that comes in, just pop your names. We'll give you a shout out. I think one, I'm disappointed because I went to university in Milwaukee
Oh yeah,
and I had a good friend was living in Chicago, so I was
yeah.
in Chicago every other weekend,
Mm.
and then I'll drive from Chicago to work on a Monday. So
Yeah, yeah,
to know that that was so close and I didn't go there, that just really upsets me.
yeah.
But I think when I watched, I think the one thing I took from the movie, and so for those who are just joining, Miss Sevaillon, bonjour. For those who are just joining,
I'm sure.
AK is a film, well, he's an actor, but also a producer, screenwriter, and he has shows not just on the BBC, but I think in Hulu for those in America, Black Ops season 1 and season 2, and Famila, who's the birthday girl. So we're going to go through the movie from a fan's point of view, but also from a as a filmmaker point of view, just
Mm.
to see the difference. Um, But I guess just the one thing about the house, I think that's one thing that I took away when I watched the beginning of the movie. It's like
Mhm.
I said, there's a possibility that this couldn't have happened if Joe wasn't returned.
You cut out for a second, sorry, say that again.
There's a chance that the world wouldn't and I told my son this, the world might not have discovered Michael and the siblings if the dad wasn't ruthless, because
No.
Africa has talent. There are probably people who were just as talented as Michael and never got out.
Yeah.
To because I think they kind of rushed it from the kids performing in the bedroom, then going on stage.
Yeah.
Next minute they're living in
Hmm.
Beverly Hills, and I'm thinking, the jump everyone might not, but I'm thinking they were dead poor.
Yeah.
They
I
were
think
dead poor.
I think part of that form of storytelling, there's a couple of things, and we might jump around a little bit because obviously, the fans in the chat are like super fans and they know stuff. Some of these people I've learned stuff from so much from like Benson and people like that who show up. They, teach me things all the time. But part of the thing, there's an assumption that we get the lore of what happened with the Michael Jackson story, because there's so many versions of this film you could have made. You could have
Mm,
made one film that was just about the Chitlin circuit and the pre-civil rights kind of thing, because actually the context of the Jackson story is they are like one of the first post-civil rights movements black families to
mm,
make it. Like Michael, they released I Want You Back in 69. Man had just gone on the moon in 69. Martin Luther King had died in 68. Like there's all this very black context to apply to it. And that's what we also have to keep in the back of our mind about the Michael story. Michael's is a black story. Yes, it's a universal, but he's ours first. Let's just throw that out. It's so important because then that also applies to the review stuff, which we'll talk later. Michael is black and he's ours first. Just saying that. It's no, you can't debate that. I'm not here to argue with your grandma. Is Michael black? It just is what it is. And that sort of impacts how we view why there's a disparity between the critic score and the audience score. So in terms to your point, you could have done a whole hour of Gary. You could have
mm,
done a whole thing, but actually, I think the film kind of assumes that we know a lot of that lore and we've seen it in detail in the Jacksons and American Dream. So it would
mm,
really be retreading steps that we've already seen. Also, I think because of the complications of how the film was made, which we might go into later with the legal stuff, Antoine Fuqua needs credit because I can see, as a filmmaker, I can see that this film has kind of been Frankensteined in a really
mm,
incredible way, because I know footage was shot probably to go in the chronology that it was meant, but was put out of sequence because, we've lost our whole third act. That means we've done an incredible thing. And obviously, I don't know if the chat will know the context, but people listening in might not know the context of that because of the NDA that was signed in '94 with the settlement. They couldn't talk about any of the allegations or anything like that. So they're kind of hamstrung in terms of what storytelling, because I think originally the '93 allegations were going to be used as a framing device for the beginning of the film and the end of the film. So he would have gotten arrested. You've seen the arrest at the Neverland and all that.
mm,
So just to backtrack on that, they had to do reshoots. So then that all the footage that was shot, which maybe they wanted to go in a kind of chronological order, I'm sure in the edit, Antoine Fuqua and the editors just said, we're going to have to do something interesting. And they did. And so back to your point, because I don't want to ramble, it's a really crucial point, is that the Jacksons, you're right, wouldn't have existed and got into Hollywood without the person who Joe was and
mm,
the person who Catherine was. It was like yin and yang. And Michael's was, I think, he's such an interesting psychological kind of conversation. For look, you're a psychotherapist, so you've studied this in depth. You're well aware of like Oedipus complexes and the kind of Grecian component of any of these heroes and the folkloric proximity. There's so much folklore in the Michael story. There's so much mythos because it is like very Grecian in a way. It's a Grecian tragedy in so many ways. And you kind of think of it in terms of like fate. Michael couldn't have existed. Michael was like the middle child of like, or the sort of middle child. They call him the rainbow baby because he was born after um Catherine lost the twin son, Brandon, which was
Oh
Marlon's
wow.
twin. Yeah, so Marlon was a twin, and Brandon was lost in childbirth. May his soul rest in peace. And then Michael was what they call a rainbow baby. So he was born after that. Michael looks the most like Joe out of all the children. It's actually like that's why God's the greatest scriptwriter ever. Like Michael looks the most like all of the children, like most like Joe out of all of the children. And it's ironic that he spent most of his life after achieving success running away from his dad. And we can speak about that maybe another time about the pathology of that. And just the idea that like his face and his physical features, him looking the most like his father, who he hated, forced him to run from that. But that's a separate conversation. But I've seen a lot of discourse online, and it's kind of got on my nerves a little bit because I kind of the discourse has been like Michael would have made it without Joe. Yeah, maybe, or Michael could be a guy who is still alive and is in Gary, Indiana, and sings karaoke on the weekends, but he's still alive and we don't know about him. But actually, he has a beautiful life and he's still alive. He never went to Encino. He never toured the world. He never became the biggest star ever. And actually, maybe that's the better version of it because he's still alive. The conditions required for Michael Jackson to become Michael Jackson was so specific and so once in a lifetime. Because look, Michael Jackson stands on the shoulders of Sammy Davis Jr., Jackie Wilson, Frankie Lyman. You know, Frankie Lyman was the Michael before Michael. You know, Frankie Lyman of Why the Fools Fall in Love and Itty Bitty Pretty One, which Michael later covered with the Jackson Five. He was a child star, and Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. And by maybe about 15, he was strung out on dope. There was the film that Lorenz Tate did so brilliantly, and ironically, Lorenz is in this film is Berry Gordy, but Frankie Lyman, the Why Do Fools Fall in Love kind of chronicles that that the rise, the quick rise and quick fall of Frankie Lyman. And actually, when Michael was at Motown, one of the things people would say to him, basically, don't become Frankie Lyman, stay away from drugs and all of that type of stuff. And the deeper tragedy is that he actually passed from drugs. So someone said Ezekiel, the Mac said Michael would have made it without Joe. It's like saying Venus and Serena would have made it without Richard. Absolute nonsense. And that's and I completely agree with you. That's the last time I'm going to look at that because the chat is so brilliant. It always distracts me. It always distracts me.
No,
It always distracts me.
there's actually something that Ezekiel did say just before we move on. Is this is what he said to you? He said Sydney's song.
Oh yeah. Oh, thank you, Ezekiel, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. There's more songs. There's more songs. There's more TV shows. I'm just putting out the stuff. I've been making beats the last day as well. So like, so yeah, there'll be something soon. I've been making more beats. But so yeah,
I think yeah,
no,
because
you go.
I did think that for me, and we've heard the story. I've seen. I've watched the American Dream, and I've seen all the documentaries, but it didn't really hit home until I saw there was something about how he was, he whipped Michael with the belt that actually for the first time, and maybe because as a father watching this, because when I watched American Dream, I was not a father, and I watched it, I could just connect to my youngest son, thinking, could I imagine how he might react if I did that to him? And
Yeah.
then the next minute they're and I just saw that wasn't easy.
There's
That
yeah, and
journey is
that journey wasn't easy, and there's steps missing from that because suddenly you see Joe dressed like a pimp. He's in
yeah,
this like fur coat, and you're like, where did you get the
yeah,
money for that? Where
yeah.
did you get the money for Volkswagen? Where did you get the money for the equipment and all of this type of stuff? I think the film, so the TV series, does a better job at chronicling that. But we've got 2 hours. So there's so many versions of Michael Jackson's story that you could cut up. You could do a whole a film of just the bad tour, of just the bad tour, and because
Oh, the
mind you,
making of Thriller.
they're making a thriller. Like, but then what's good is I really like the documentaries that were made around those. So like the Spike Lee's documentaries are excellent. The Road to Off the Wall, from Motown to Off the Wall, that documentary that he did is great. The Bad 25 documentary is great. And Spike is such a super fan, so he there's a lot of like hidden footage and things that we've never seen, like outtakes and all that type of stuff, and he chronicles it with love. But anyway. So if you want to go into depth, there's the books. There's so many books. There's J. Randy Taraborelli's Magic and the Madness, which my auntie Monique bought me at 10. She bought me that book at 10, and it's one of the best books you'll ever read. And I'm talking about the original version with the pink kind of cover before J. Randy Taraborelli rewrote it to contextualize the 2005 trial. But the original book, where everything ends in 1990, is a fascinating read, and it's almost like the definitive, to me it's the definitive kind of story of his life. He also wrote a book about Diana Ross, and there's loads of other books. There's Joseph Vogel's book, which chronicles the music in like depth. There's so many amazing books about Michael. There's Michael in his own words. There's so many great books, but J. Randy Taraborelli's book is a great book, and was given that when I was 10, and it's a fascinating book, but it details a lot of this stuff. Now, with Michael and Joe, I think the film is interesting because obviously we've got a film to make, so we need to find an angle. And in the absence of a proper third act, which is what they had originally, we need to try and find a villain. So Joe is the villain of the piece, and the story becomes about Michael's escape from his brothers and from his family, and Joe is the villain. And like at every sort of instance, you got Coleman Domingo kind of sneering around the corner, like when Michael goes for ice cream, the door opens, there's Coleman there with his nostrils flared and his mouth open, like that's his like signature thing. He's like looking around, and look, strictly speaking, Joe was a villain in some ways. Like he had his extramarital stuff, because we've not even brought into the equation the whole Gina Sprague conversation, and about Janet and Randy and Catherine and what happened there. But Google that. We've not brought in Giovanni Jackson, Michael's half sister, who he had with a lady called Cheryl Terrell, I believe was her name. And there's all these different side stories, and we could cut it a million times and find different ways to do it. But this film was effectively like Thriller Live or Michael the Musical on screen. It was a very simple, palatable narrative that we can get, and actually framing Joe as the villain was probably an easier thing to do than necessarily painting Evan Chandler as a villain of sorts, because that's a whole, if we go down that line, that's a whole different thing. And the fans in the chat know, and the casual fans will be aware of who Evan Chandler is, and Tom Sneddon, and all these other kind of characters. But I think this was the simplest version of telling this story, and we have to start from the idea that the film is called Michael. So it's actually not the Jacksons. An American Dream was about the Jacksons. So you got the courting of Catherine and Joseph. You got that. You got every character had a side story, so they were put in focus. Jackie had a story. Tito, you got to learn about Tito and Dee Martinez, his late wife, mother to the boys in 3T. You got to see that and the friction that caused. But it's very specifically called Michael. So we spend time on Michael. It's not Michael and Quincy, it's Michael. So it's actually extolling the virtues of Michael's genius and his singular narrative and his sort of singular focus. What I would say though was, people have been like, oh, Michael had ADHD and all this type of stuff. I think that was an angle that the film took. I also think that the kind of the whoopings that he took from Joseph, I think were interesting because it sort of painted Michael in a way that the American Dream didn't show him. In the American Dream, you see Michael being defiant to Joe, running away, and Joe hitting his head and being clumsy and all of this type of stuff. It sort of paints a different angle, because from my understanding in the books I've read, Michael was like, he wasn't like this. The Michael who left Gary, Indiana, before he went to LA, was like a normal kid, but he was like a rambunctious, confident kid. Even there's a 79 1980 interview that Michael does with ABC. He does it with Sylvia Chase. It's on 2020, and the footage is round, but it's with Michael in the orange shirt and the like short cropped afro. And they were doing a kind of thing on the Triumph. I think it was a Triumph tour, maybe the Destiny tour. But they interview his mum, and the line says, Michael's quiet now. I think the stage might have done that to him because he wasn't quiet before. Like Michael, when he was a kid, was not the version they sort of paint. I think he was just like a kid, curious. and all this type of stuff. And you take a kid from Gary, Indiana, and he's the star of the show, he's the breadwinner. And you take him from Gary, Indiana, and you bring him to Encino, and it's such a culture shock. And mind you, he's so young that like his brothers are already in deep into puberty by this point. They're already chasing girls, all this type of stuff. So when they land in LA, they're a bit more formed. And so Michael was just in this really interesting pocket. So I think the film has to kind of find an angle for him as a kid, but I don't know. We will never know. But it sort of paints him from early as this kind of introvert, and I don't know if he was. I don't know if he was. I think he was that insanely talented child performer, like the greatest boy soprano that we've probably ever heard on record. The greatest boy soprano that we've ever heard on record. We've talked about it previously. Michael, the kid vocalist, I think is better than Michael, the adult vocalist. Shoot me if you want. I enjoy listening to younger Michael because I just get blown away by how the quality of vocal, and so you hear it actually in you hear it when you watch the film and they use isolated vocals, they strip the vocals back, and you're like, wow, like that first recording session that he does with Berry Gordy, and you see Lorenz Tate like so masterfully encapsulates what the audience is feeling and what everyone must have been feeling, how pure this voice was and how advanced it was, like how great a mimic Michael was. Now, there are also some discrepancies, because I was that person in the theater, like, it was pitch black, but I was like with my little notes. I was like using my light. I wrote so many notes. Like, look, I've got a whole notepad here of just notes. I've got notes galore. I was like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. They weren't singing "Never Can Say Goodbye" in 1969. That didn't happen. They didn't have big afros till they fully got to Motown. They didn't have Motown afros on the Chitlin circuit. But they have to tell a story, and they have to tell the story in the easiest way possible so that this film can reach 1 billion. And so it needs to sort of exist as a story outside of just like something for the fans and the accuracy of the fans. But I would say, interestingly, the credits actually is some of the most interesting credits I've ever seen. In that you get to the credits, and if you watch, there'll usually be a legal disclaimer that says there's a usual spiel that we see on films where it will say something like some of these things have been fictionalized or whatever, or any relation to
any names are similar. It's not
exactly.
Hey, Derek.
In this, it's really interesting because the estate have been so meticulous and probably anticipating potential lawsuits or fan backlash. They state up front that the Jackson 5 later recorded "Never Can Say Goodbye," but originally it was written by Clifton Davis. So because that was the first note that I wrote. It's like "Never Can Say Goodbye" was released in 71. It was on the what was it? It was on the Maybe Tomorrow album or some stuff like that. Like I'd already like written it down, but they had a line for that. They'd also had lines in the credits about like saying, look, we want to shout out Frank Dillio, we want to shout out Sandy Gallin, because we didn't have time to include them in this story. So I'd say they did their due diligence in terms of like anticipating the sort of anoraks like myself would be like, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. Like why is Marlon got a hot date in like 1982 when he's married to Carol Parker? That was her original. He was married to Carol Parker in 1975. Like, how would that work? There was all these discrepancies, but they have to tell a story, and they use certain devices to help do that. It's similar to the NWA film, whereby like I'm a big Dre fan, as you know. Dr. Dre wasn't beating up Bloods in the studio in 96. That stuff just didn't happen. Nothing But a G Thing wasn't made at Dr. Dre's house, and he's coming down the stairs and he's playing he discovers the line that is in Leon Haywood's song on the Mook. No, that didn't happen. But we're trying to tell a film. We're trying to make a compelling film. This isn't a documentary. So that being said, you have to give allowance for that. I've also said there's a version of the Michael story that you could do, which is called Michael Jackson: An American Tragedy. Because actually, there's Michael Jackson: An American Tragedy, which you can really get into the nitty gritty of everything on. But this film was celebratory. It was a
Yeah.
celebratory film, and like I saw the reviews, and to be
Yeah,
honest, this is
what did
what.
you make of when, yeah, as a filmmaker, what did you make of
Mhm.
the reviews? And because they seem to be universal, saying, why didn't you address those
Yeah,
allegations,
and we'll
regardless of the
go into,
fact that the film finished,
yeah,
you know,
in
five
'88,
years
in '88,
before? Yeah,
yeah,
so but they were
and
like,
look.
well, we didn't see that, so it's a rubbish. Yeah.
Yeah, look, there's a private MJ conversation that I have that like we can have that off the record, but like the internet is such that like if you're not really deliberate with your words, you can get tripped up and this stuff lives in posterity. So there's a
Mhm.
private version of this conversation that I'll have, which will allow for a bit more nuance. But what I will say about it is there is a narrative with look, Michael Jackson was an apex star. He's the brightest star that we have ever seen in our lifetime, and probably will ever see. And like I said, with Joe and Catherine and the set of circumstances that were required in order to create Michael, there was a very specific set of circumstances that allowed Michael to become who he was and the height of who he was. Bigger than Elvis, bigger than the Beatles, bigger than anything we've ever seen or will see in our lifetimes. And I started by saying, like, ostensibly, Michael Jackson is a black man who grew up in pre-civil rights America. He did the Chitlin circuit. They were driving between Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, doing these performances. One important component that the TV show did kind of detailed that we couldn't get in this film, but there was elements of it, is Steel Town Records. Bobby
Oh, yeah.
Taylor, Steel Town Records, Gladys Knight, Cheech and Chong. Like there was a group called the Vancouvers who were part of like bringing them to Steel Town. The song that they're singing, Big Boy, there's not just a song that they wrote. That's a Steel Town record. That was their first song that they released. So there's a whole pocket of narrative that is missing, but that's the
Mhm.
links to the Black America conversation, and ostensibly Michael Jackson is a black man. And the
Mhm.
problem is we get it so twisted because what we see in later life, because of the sort of ambiguity of Michael, part vitiligo, part Hydra Queens that he was using to balance, and the Benequins that he was using to balance out his skin, part, you know, the nose jobs, the cleft in the chin. Michael just became just something that had veered off from blackness
Mhm.
visually. But Michael Jackson is a black man. And I think the reviewers haven't been able to reconcile this idea that like the brightest star that ever lived in pop culture was black. And so what happens is we, as you know, black fans are told that this is how you should discipline your star, and we're going to tell you what we want to see from a black artist. Even though he's died, we're going to tell you
Tell the story.
how to receive him. And actually, what I've loved about the conversation, because it doesn't always happen with the wider black culture, what I've loved is people were like, yeah, say what you're saying, but we're going to go see it anyway, I don't care. And that's how I felt. I was like, yeah, that's all good, I hear you, but this is a family thing, and we're going to deal with it as a family. um
But then
I,
there were two elements of that because I think
mhm,
there's the hardcore MJ fans. I've got
mhm,
one of the receptionists at my office who
yeah,
has seen it
mhm,
four times already, and she's going to see the fifth time this
yeah,
weekend.
yeah,
She went to see it at the IMAX on Monday at 2 in the
amazing,
afternoon, and it
crazy,
was packed.
crazy,
2 in the afternoon was packed. She
crazy,
said,
crazy.
here,
People are going
here,
to get
here
fired
in
from
London.
work. People are going to get fired from work because of that.
But then there was the other side, which is what I remember from the OJ trial when I lived
Mm,
in
mhm.
where was that? I
In
think it was
LA.
Milwaukee. It
Okay.
was we're it was, this is our guy and we're celebrating him. This was a
Yeah.
like the Black Panther. It's like, yeah, we've got our first superhero, so we're gonna go,
Yeah.
even though we don't understand the whole Marvel stuff, but this
Yeah.
is our hero, so we're
This
gonna
is
go.
this is
It
this is
felt
this,
like that for this, like this is our
I
guy.
agree. I agree. And there's a thing that there's this theory I have, or this idea, it's a little noodle or nugget of an idea in like in the pursuit of stadium status, black artists, male artists lose their way. And by stadium status, I mean literally that, like going for stadiums. Like Michael was a stadium artist,
Hmm.
Kanye became a stadium artist. And in the pursuit of that, which is the highest level, when you become a stadium, arenas are one thing, clubs are one thing, and arenas are just below stadiums. When you become a stadium artist, talking about 60,000 people, or you're having to do Wembley and all of that type of stuff, when
7 nights
Michael,
in a row. I mean,
exactly, and you can sell them out consistently with no problem, you lose something as a black artist and you're forced to compromise something. And it happened with Kanye, and I don't want to go into that for obvious
Mm,
reasons because this isn't a Kanye conversation. I say it didn't happen with Beyonce because Beyonce kept actually a core black audience, black female audience in her rise as a stadium artist. But those are the only two examples that I really have of Michael, or three examples: Michael, Kanye, and Beyonce as like pure stadium artists. They could sell out on their name alone,
mm,
stadium. But with those two male artists that I named, they lose something. It's like Icarus. You're reaching for that thing, and then your wings, you're reaching high, and your wings get clipped because you've reached too high. And then what happens in death, Michael, because Michael at one point became like this universal thing. Everyone was like, oh, he's our artist as well. And I
mm,
saw this, I mean, he's for all of us. He's for all of us. And it's really funny because I saw some, some at times like this, loads of great footage comes out. For
mm,
those of us who are still fans anyway, this is just not new to us because we're just
mm.
looking at this stuff anyway. But what's great is that like everyone becomes a fan and everyone's posting footage and it's great. Love it. But someone posted some footage of like a Jackson 5 concert, which kind of flies in the face of the film when they're doing I'll Be There. And they're performing I'll Be There, and like there's a young lady in a wheelchair, and that's
Oh
beautiful. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that may or may not have happened, and it might not have happened in the sense that when you look at those early Jackson Mania videos, and this one in particular, what is the common denominator? Young black audiences, afros, young black people, post civil rights movement saw themselves.
Mm,
And it's no surprise that Berry Gordy with the Jacksons, and particularly with that move from Detroit to LA, because that's a whole thing. That's a whole specific thing about the history of black music. When Berry Gordy said, "Listen, I'm moving to LA because I want to get into films and I want to, that's where everything's going. I reach this level. I
mm,
could be Stacks and stay here, or I could actually be bigger and go to the home of entertainment." But in doing that, the Motown kind of branding changed, and the Jacksons were a key component of that. The sound of young America. That's what's emblazoned on all of those early 45s, the sound of young America. And that's what the Jacksons were and became. But if you look at their early concerts, black, 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 black. And if you speak to a lot of people of like an older generation, they'll be like, yeah, the audiences was black. As Jackson Mania increased and they went to Epic and released Off the Wall and into Thriller, forget about it. Michael's for everyone. But
mm,
then
mm.
by 93, and with the allegations and all that type of stuff, no, Michael, the love for Michael in certain quarters had declined. And I think in death, I'd say in death, Michael Jackson returned to the bosom of blackness, which
No,
ultimately
no,
provided,
no, I think that Remember the Time
yeah,
video and the song was, and then he did Soul Train, he did the NAACP, he did,
100%, 100%. And I'm not
mm,
disagreeing, but what I'm saying is there was still like at certain points, like when Bad came out, some of the reviews from Bad, from black reviewers, were like the actual title track, Bad. They were like, is this the funkiest, the blackest that Michael Jackson could do? Because if you think about Bad, Bad is a funk record. It's a James Brown kind of funk record. It's got Jimmy Smith on the organs. There was a point post Thriller that Michael Jackson had just become such a juggernaut that early group who'd followed, the early crowd who'd followed him,
I'm Up the
in
Wall.
early Jackson mania, they they had to share Michael with the world. Do you see what I'm
Mm,
saying? It's not like, and it happens with all. It happened with Kanye. It never really happened with Beyonce because Beyonce is like still kept her core black audience and brought other people along with her. But I don't want to ramble. I want to stay on point, because you could, you could keep talking about this, but I think that look, I agree with you about the, sort of the night around 1993 when he was doing the Soul Train stuff and all that
Yeah,
type of stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Remember the Time was a very,
yeah,
he took it back to Africa, he
yeah,
took it back
yeah.
to Egypt,
Because at
and
that time when uh, him being on Soul Train, because
yeah,
it was like, I moved to the States in '92, so when he was on Soul Train, it was like, oh, he's come to our show, and he was like, and he kept saying, look, I'm a black man, I'm a proud black
mm,
man, and it was like, okay, you're back, because Bad was as big as an album it was internationally. It didn't
mm.
hit home locally. It
No.
didn't feel like, okay, we've lost. Where's the soul? Where's the
Where's it?
crew?
But it's because he's a juggernaut by then, and you're right. We talked about Dangerous and what Dangerous represents. I've always said Dangerous is the greatest New Jack Swing album ever made. It's like the highest point of New Jack Swing to me, anyway. It's like Teddy at his kind of best, but the wrench the wrench that I'll throw in with the not Super Bowl, with the Soul Train performance, was that Michael was sat the whole time during that Remember the
Yeah, he
Time
sprained his
performance.
ankles, so it was on. It was
Allegedly,
on.
allegedly, because the story goes, now if you read J. Randy Taraborelli's book, the story goes
Oh.
that he was just flexing. He hadn't sprained his leg. He was just like, because the story goes, and he says to someone like, look how dope I am. I'm going to sit in this chair and just do the performance. So there's conjecture about that, but those things we also have to remember, because there's so many different Michael Jacksons. He's presented as like this kind of Peter Pan kind of like figure who's just sort of floating around and everything's happenstance. No, he's one of the most deliberate people that has ever lived. He's one of the most deliberate people that has ever lived. He read A Man as a Man Thinketh, which is one of those early books for like The Secret and the law of attraction, and what you say and what you talk, you receive. And Michael Jackson was super deliberate. You don't buy the Beatles catalog, the Sony ATV catalog, from just being like, I'm just gonna float around. No, so there's so many different versions of Michael Jackson, and we will probably never know the definitive version of him.
Could they
And this is
do that though? Could they do like a Michael Jackson cinematic universe and just start doing
well,
Michael Jackson the businessman, Michael
I had this,
Jackson?
so I had this theory, or I had this like idea, because there's been sort of talk about, oh, they're going to do a sequel, and I'm sure if there's a way that they can sort of speak to Diana Ross's estate and get clearance, and speak to Janet and get clearance, and speak to, try and find a workaround for the whole NDA. There's a version of it where you release that footage or repackage that footage, or you choose another actor to play him in that era where it's very difficult. Because one thing I struggled with by the end, when we got to Jafar playing Michael in the Bad era, is that no amount of prosthesis can approximate what
Mm,
Michael looked at that point. And
mm,
it's a really tricky one, because that was the point that I was like, yeah, he doesn't really
yeah,
look like Mike. He doesn't really look
yeah,
like him at this
yeah.
point, because Michael had done something so specific to his face. Plastic surgeons in years to come will call it like the Michael Jackson face or whatever, but it was so specific that it was very
Yeah,
difficult for his nephew to approximate, because from the mid 70s all the way up to like that sort of 84 period, there was points that I was like, oh snap, he looks like him. When
yeah, yeah,
after he got burnt and he was in bed, there was angles that I was like, the makeup artist did an incredible job here.
yeah,
But
yeah,
by the time we
yeah.
got to Bad, even though the physical performance was great and the stage performance was great and the staging and the lighting and cinematography, I was like, it doesn't look like Michael. It doesn't look like him.
Yeah, and I think because they shot him in the dangerous area,
They
so
did,
they
because he's got the white shirt with the red kind of
yeah,
lapels,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was footage that they shot, I
Actually, they
believe.
did history because that I think that's Earth Song.
No, that is I believe that is him in 93, like just
Okay.
before. That's him just before the news broke about the case. That is him
Mm.
just before. But I think they might well have also shot some history kind of era footage. But Yeah, so that was, if I had a critique, it was some of those things, and it was the kind of Hollywoodification of the story. But those critiques, I don't, the cinema was filled with so much joy, and I saw it twice. And
Okay.
I saw it
What made you
twice.
see it twice though? Because
It's Michael, man. It's Michael. Got to see it twice. These look. This is the joy of cinema, because there was a level of communion and togetherness and camaraderie that you're gonna get for someone as beloved as Michael. And it was a great cinematic experience. I saw it once in Santa Monica, then I saw it in Inglewood with a very active, talkative, participatory audience, and then I actually
oh,
took
were
my
they
niece.
talking throughout the whole stuff?
I mean, someone next to me was, and it was Inglewood. So I wasn't. I tried politely to be like, because they were talking about their lunch or something. They were just having private conversations, and I was like, "Can you keep it quiet?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's Inglewood. I don't know which gang they're connected, so I'm gonna just keep my mouth quite closed." Anyway, big up to Inglewood. Big up to Inglewood. But with and then I took my niece and nephew when I was in Chicago to the cinema, and the youngest of my sister's children is too young to watch that.
Mm.
So we went to see Super Mario instead. So I would have seen it 3 times. However, the cinema in Chicago where we saw it was ram-packed because they had back-to-back screenings.
What?
I looked at the thing and it was like there was a screening every half an hour. And moreover, the actual lobby of the cinema, they'd made it conducive to fans. There was people moonwalking, there was these installations, it was amazing. You had little kids who had never seen white Mike, let alone black Michael, who were doing the dances, and it was a beautiful thing. So this is the power of cinema and the power of like a sort of in-person community viewing, which I don't think you can get from sitting at home and watching it on streaming and pausing and stopping. You're captive for those 2 hours. And I think that with good filmmaking, it has the ability to bend time. So the film said it was 2 hours. It zipped along so quickly.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? Because Benson's
Big up
so Ben,
Benson. Big
so
up Benson.
he went to watch it at the IMAX.
Yeah,
He bought the first 3 rows.
yeah.
He
Big
bought
money Benson.
he
Big money
bought the
Benson.
seats beside him, and
Yeah.
so he had 6 seats.
Big money Benson.
And he sent me a message like, and he paid to watch it 5 times on Wednesday. So he started at 10 in the morning, and then
Big
his
money
last showing
Benson.
was at 10 at
Yeah.
night.
Yeah, that's dope.
But he was like Questlove, like no, they didn't sing Human Nature on that tour, and he
Yeah.
was. I think he couldn't, he was so much everything. And he even said about the Thriller video that he was clapping inwards, not outwards, and and I'm like, dude, I didn't notice any of that. And so
It's yeah. Big up Benson, but here's the thing. It's like this is how beloved Michael is, and this is the ownership that we all feel to him. As much as I'll be like, I'm a Michael Jackson super fan. No, there are people who Michael has a personal experience, like I think I've said to you, like about my family in America. Like when Michael died, people were ringing me as though I'd lost a separate family member that they weren't related to. My auntie Carol rang me, my auntie Monique rang me. They were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? We're just checking on you." And I was like, Auntie, he's dead. He's dead. You know what I mean? I was proper balling. I was proper balling. Anyone who I went to primary school with knows how much I loved Michael Jackson. I used to come through. I used to come through with the. I used to come through and do the performances, the Billie Jean performance. I remember one time I sang "Who's Loving You" for like a little talent show that we had. Like I was a Michael fanatic, as we all were. But this goes back to my overriding point, and this is like a very selfish thing, and people can shout me down. I'm happy to be shouted down by it, but there's a connection that Michael will have with a black audience that no one else can have. I mean, that no one else can have. So if you're a young black boy growing up at a certain time and you see this kid singing "Who's Loving You" on the Ed Sullivan Show with almost celestial, with a celestial brilliance, with a gift that you feel is divinely bestowed, like you're seeing God. You're actually seeing the beauty of God. And look, this isn't hyperbole me saying this. Watch that performance and try not to get chills. It's crazy. But I'm seeing it and I'm going, this is a black child. And particularly in a world that denigrates and like devalues black bodies and black talent, and try to uplift. You tried to tell me Chalamet is special. I don't care. I might not work because I'm saying stuff like this, but you try and tell me certain people are on that level. Nah, they're not Mike. They're
Yeah.
not Mike. But
But
it also tells me how brilliant you have to be. You have to be
mm,
Mike level as a
mm,
black person. And it's like, it's undeniable. So when I was young and I'd see that, I'd be like, oh, this is possible. Or
yeah.
maybe it isn't possible, but I'm watching a version of myself. I'm seeing a young black boy and going like, I want to do that.
Mm,
I'm seeing myself. And this is why representation is so powerful. Seeing yourself
yeah.
is so powerful.
But then
Go on.
what they have done consistently, whether
Yeah.
it's Rolling Stones or
Yeah.
Billboard magazine, is that when they're rating the top 100 singers of all time,
Mm,
vocalists,
mm,
they put Michael probably, 20s and 30s,
yeah.
and they forget the kid who started singing, and the fact that vocally he didn't change, the soul was still there. It's
Mm,
just that he got to a level where the performance is what people wanted to see, and vocally
yeah.
he had it. He didn't lose it, but
Yeah.
he just stayed.
Yeah.
He moved into a performance level and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if they're saying he became too powerful and
Mm,
too big, and we need to
mm.
knock him down some pegs.
Yeah,
Whether with
perhaps, because I've seen those lists where like Michael isn't rated up there, and like as as a fan of singers and vocalists, and there's some amazing singers from the UK that I love who are just talented. Like I went to school with Ricardo Williams, who's one of the greatest singers I've ever heard. He was a childhood prodigy vocalist, and incredible talent. So I value the idea of a young, precocious, God-given talent and all that. I think with Michael, the thing that happened, we've got so many different versions of this man, physiologically, physically, everything. The kid version doesn't exist. He'll never exist again. Just like the man in totality doesn't exist. Just like the sort of mid 70s or early 70s version of him that sings on Forever Michael or Dancing Machine is a slightly, you hear his voice breaking, so that's a different thing. Forever Michael is actually a really interesting album to listen to vocally for Michael, because you got songs like Cinderella Stay a While, We're Almost There, and you're just hearing someone who's settling into almost their adult voice,
mm,
and it's incredible. But you're clocking that at Forever Michael time, 75. He's 17 years old. Like he's 17 years old and doing all this type of stuff. I
mm,
would say there's a point of Michael peaking, and there's a point where Michael's, because he wasn't being produced as rigorously, some of his habits started to come through. So the brand Michael Jackson, the Coca-Cola version of Michael Jackson is Shamon, he, and these vocal ticks and ad-libs, which is dope. But the steeped in soul Motown version of him is just like out. It's just God tier. And I think Quincy was the last producer who was actually able to produce him, like produce the crap out of him in terms of like, all right, cool. I know how to use your voice. I'm gonna
mm,
drop. I'm gonna drop a songs a minor third to give you more headroom for the top and all this type of stuff. So we see the full range of your voice. Um, Off the wall, it's so funny when you talk to people like technicians, music technicians, or people who are around that time when it dropped, and how startling it was to hear Michael Jackson with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough using his falsetto in that way.
mm,
And that being like his coming out as an adult vocalist. Because I
mm,
don't think he'd sang in that register before in his sort of adult thing. If you listen to the first epic releases, from the Jackson self-titled Jacksons to Going Places to Destiny, he doesn't really sing like that until Quincy gets hold of him. So my point being is, and back to your thing about where his placement on the vocalist list is, that like up until 87, 88, when Quincy was at the helm and was like the captain of the ship to some degree, even though like around Dangerous, Michael was asserting a lot of control. Quincy just knew what to do with him. And I say bad was sorry, dangerous was great because actually the songs were still banging and the vocals were still banging, but actually there was a part of his voice that was what we associate with Michael, that kind of you know what I mean? And he was still rocking with Seth Riggs. He still had his vocal coach and doing all that type of stuff, and his voice was still beautiful because you hear records like Childhood, which is an incredible
On
ballad.
history, yeah. On
Yeah,
history,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Incredible ballad. But I think Michael Jackson's placement in that list falls because of some of those vocal ticks.
Okay,
And because of
okay.
that, because actually, if we were just judging it on like Kid Michael and we are giving some emphasis on that, that's one of the greatest singers that's ever existed. Like I was cruising around the other day listening to the Ben album, which was like an album that takes me back because I got the Ben album. I think we said this before when I was about like 9 or 10, and I remember going upstairs in our old pub, in my family's old pub, and just sitting like after school. I would just sit there and listen to it on headphones and just think like, right, this album came out in 72, and this is a 14-year-old singing like this. You listen to there's a song called What Goes Around Comes Around. There's his version of My Girl. There's Greatest Show on Earth. There's In Our Small Way. There's all these songs that you're like, right, this is a kid doing this, singing like his version of Shooby Dooby Doo Da Day by Stevie Wonder is crazy, crazy, crazy. The soul content of an old man. So anyway, I'm rambling because we can ramble
Yeah.
all day
Oh,
long
well,
about
I've got a question that somebody's
yeah,
been passing here. It
sure.
says, what do you think about the racism that Michael faced in his time, and does the allegations create a buzz at
Time.
times in the US?
So I won't talk too much about the allegations and stuff because like look, I'm not a legal expert. But there's, I think there's a lot of well-documented stuff about the potential conspiracy from the family and all that type of stuff and the reasons why he settled. And we could do that all day, but I probably won't go into that. But in terms of racism, there's a scene with Walter Yetnikoff, played by Mike Myers,
I didn't
played by
realize that was Mike Myers until
yeah, yeah,
somebody.
yeah. I only knew it was Mike Myers because I kept on seeing him at the premiere, and I was like, "What is Mike Myers doing here?" I saw him at the premieres around the world, and I thought it was maybe some overspill from Eddie Murphy's AFI
Okay.
celebration. So I kept on seeing him on the red carpet. I was like, and then I put two and two together, and he did a great job. And I think the way they dramatized what happened was great. And I want to talk about Branca in a second, but I think like in terms of the MTV thing. I don't think it was specific to just Michael. I just think they weren't playing black artists, full stop. But I think because of the snub that Michael faced at the 1980 Grammys for Off the Wall, spurred him on so much that he was like, "Yo, you're not going to pigeonhole me in R&B. I've taped on my wall that I want to be huge. I want to be big. I want to have the biggest selling album. All this type of stuff. You're not going to pigeonhole me. You're not. Listen, I love Donna Summer, but you're not going to keep me with Donna Summer, and you're not going to ghettoize me in that way because it's like, yo, I came through the Chitlin circuit. I came through Motown. I've come through disco. I want to be bigger than big. So actually, I think by the time he was doing those mini movies for Thriller, and he'd done Billie Jean, which I think is it British guy Steve Barron, I think, directed it. By that time they weren't playing it, but they weren't playing any black artists because we forget that. I mean, music videos were rubbish around that time.
Yeah.
They were terrible. If you look back at those early 80s videos, whether it be for the Police or whoever from that period of time, they were whack. Hall and Oates were doing some, and they just weren't very good. And it was a blanket policy for MTV, so it wasn't just specific to Michael, but Michael was like, "Yo, I'm Michael Jackson. Listen, you could do what you want, but you're playing my videos." And then that inadvertently opened up the doors. So I don't know necessarily if it was a concerted effort for Michael Jackson to sort of rally the troops for blackness. It was Michael rallying the troops for himself. And he had the ear of Walter Yetnikoff because it's like Thriller was basically the stimulus package for the record industry. The record industry had stalled around that time. It was doing real bad, and Thriller at one point was selling like newspapers or loo roll. It was like it was doing at one point it was doing 500,000 copies a week, which is crazy, and that became a stimulus package for a stagnant music industry. Because imagine you're buying Thriller and then, oh, let me buy the Police album, let me buy Synchronicity. Oh, actually, let me get this as well. Oh, let me get Prince Controversy. Oh, let me get what 1999's just come out. Let me buy this as well. So it reinvigorated a stagnated music industry at the time. So Walter Yetnikoff, who at that point CBS I think had Cyndi Lauper. They had a bag of like really prominent people. So
Except Bruce Springsteen
Bruce
and
Springsteen, and equally Branca was managing some of those people as well. He was managing Springsteen, so there was a double. They were coming at it from a double. It was a double pronged attack, so to speak. And so actually, Walter Yetnikoff being like, "Yeah, I'm going to pull everyone," from MTV was he could do that because Michael was the asset. One thing which because I talked about the credits and how they brought up Sandy Gallin, who replaced Frank Dilio at the sort of turn of the decade in the 90s. But Frank Dilio was actually, I think the way that him and Michael became connected was he was a record promoter. I think he was a record promoter, and he'd helped get a lot of those songs to radio. He'd helped service the kind of radio with Michael's records, and he was like, "Oh, you're doing a good job, so bring him onto the team." And he was with Michael to the end of the 80s. But with Branca, it's really interesting because we've talked about it before, about the influence of John Branca on Michael Jackson, and it's really tricky because he's very heavily featured in the film, and from some corners they might be like, "Who is this white guy? Who is this white guy?" And he's got too much control. And I know like Paris is not. They're not simpatico. They're not seeing eye to eye. But there's a reason why Michael Jackson rehired John Branca several times after firing him, because he knew that like they just had a synergy. And it's sort of like it's a really tricky thing when you're the executor of the estate and you were also a character in the film. Miles Teller's playing him, but as a junior sort of as a constant learner about Michael Jackson and someone who's like studied, it can't be overstated that like as one of the key components that make Michael Jackson, John Branca's up there. You got to give him his due. As
But
like
the question here is, I can't understand why Branca appeared more often than Barry
this is a
Gordy in
good
the film.
this is a good point. This is a good point, and this is a good question. And I would love to talk to someone who is involved in the film because I have questions. That Motown section was like, yo, we want to see more of it. But I think they ran into problems because if you think about Cat Graham was playing Diana Ross, Berry Gordy, Diana Ross, intrinsically linked. Berry Gordy, Diana Ross, Suzanne DePass. There's like not nearly enough of those people. But I think because Diana Ross didn't want to be involved and didn't want her likeness used after things had been filmed, she got removed. There's going to be so much.
Can you do that? Can you do that?
I think you can. I think you can at a certain point. If you're a public figure, I think you can have your likeness used anyway. But I don't know the full legalities. I need to talk to someone in editorial policy. And someone said Benson said he wanted to make himself look important. I think partly the thing is John Branca is never talked about in any of the visual representations of Michael Jackson, and it is I think it's important he does get his due. But we'll go back to him in a second. With Berry Gordy, like there's a scene that kind of made me cry. Is when they're in the studio, he's asking about the EQ and all this type of stuff. And Billy D. Williams had played Berry in the Jacksons An American Dream, and there was a similar scene in that TV series. And in a brief moment, Michael hugs Berry Gordy when Joseph comes in. And you realize, and Michael's always said it about Berry Gordy being a father figure to him. And it's so beautiful because actually it was Joseph's insistence that the children call him Joseph because he didn't want them calling him dad or whatever. And so to actually have a real father figure in that way was a beautiful thing. There's also, if you read J. Randy Taraborelli's book, there's also a passage in it whereby
this was some story I've been a lawyer say public.
Oh yeah, I've read that. Public figures need to give clearance for their use of their names and likeness, especially in California's legal system. Fair play, fine. But in there's a passage in that book where it talks about just before the Jacksons leave Motown for Epic, and it's one of the most important moments that Michael's had. He, without the knowledge of Joseph or any of his brothers, he went to Berry's house and had a summit with him and said, "Look, I want to meet you." And this was just around the time that Jermaine, I think Jermaine had like, recently married Hazel Gordy and all of this type of stuff. And he said, I think Michael said to Berry, "Mr. Gordy, please don't hurt my family," or something like that. And Berry said, "I'm not going to hurt your family." So it was a big summit. And I think when Michael got back to the house, Papa Joe was pissed at him, like, "How dare you?" But this was like one of Michael's first forays as like a young adult going in and handling business by himself. But the fact that he and Berry Gordy had that relationship and were in
Mm.
dialogue, that's some father-son kind of thing. And the lovely person who pointed out that, like, yeah, why is John Branca more heavily involved? I think that might have to do with the legality, because if you really want to go deep into it, there was a scene with Gladys Knight,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
she's
yeah. When
singing,
she introduced them, yeah.
yeah, but Gladys Knight was the person who actually discovered the Jacksons. She actually discovered them, not Diana Ross. The Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5 album was a great marketing strategy. And look, it can't be overstated how good Motown were with public relations. That scene where he tells Michael, "You're 8."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And was
That
that the?
happened. That was real. That stuff was real. That stuff was real. Michael Jackson was billed younger than he actually was when he came out. And that, if you think about that practice, that's an industry standard practice. I know a lot of very well-known singers, particularly women, because it's like a horrible thing in our business, but it affects
Mm,
women
mm, mm,
particularly,
mm,
where they
mm,
lie
mm.
about their age, where it's just, and you don't have to do it so much now because like we're a lot more transparent. But because in the old way, the pre-internet way, the image and how you presented your image and the first look that you had with the public was so important. So
Mm.
shaving 2 years off of Michael Jackson's age made him even more impressive, because 10's cool, but imagine being 8 and being that good.
I mean,
And
that good. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and so it's all in the J. Randy Taraborelli book, because he would go back to this thing about public relations. Gory would say it's public relations, and that was actually Michael the first forays into understanding how you control the narrative.
Mm.
Now, there was even the whole Motown thing. Motown were very apolitical. It was only when Stevie and Marvin broke away from the reins of Berry and said, like, "No, we're writing our own stuff and we want to do some political stuff." Because hitherto that they were like, "Yo, you got to sing these love songs and that's it."
Mm.
In that period of rebellion, that early 70s period of rebellion, the J5 represented the sound of young America, whereas Marvin Gaye was doing What's Going On and Stevie was doing Innovisions, which had like real political overtures, rightly so. But so there would be stuff like press junkets where they specifically wouldn't talk about any civil rights stuff, even though they were outwardly very black, big afros and all of that type of stuff. And then there was there's anecdotal thing of like Michael talking to a black reporter, and having been told like, "Yo, we're gonna stay away from the politics." As he's leaving the guy, he gives him a soul shake and like, right on. You know what I mean? And it was just Motown instilled, because they had their whole charm school. Motown instilled the whole thing about public relations and all that type of stuff. And I think Michael Jackson actually took it to its zenith, and it's one of the
Mm.
things that became an albatross round his neck later in life, because Michael planted a lot of those stories about muscles, the boa constrictor, and
Mm.
hyperbaric chamber. Like the hyperbaric chamber, which was at the I think it was the Broffman Medical Institute, which was kind of an oxygenated chamber to increase healing and all that type of stuff. That picture of him, which ended up in a National Enquirer, he posted
Mm.
it. He got in and then he took the pictures, and then Frank DeLeo leaked the pictures. That's the story. Now, and I'm not saying this to denigrate Michael, but Michael was a genius showman. He was P.T. Barnum. He was P.T. Barnum, and he wanted to create that circus thing. The problem is, it's the Faustian bargain. when you make the bargain, when you make the deal with the devil, you can't control, you just can't
Mm,
control the thing. And by 1991, 1992, when tastes changed and times changed, Michael couldn't control the thing. So the Wacko
yeah.
Jacko thing had bolted the stable and you can't control it. Was there
Mhm.
elements of racism in that? 100%. But I think would be wrong if we say if we don't give Michael Jackson agency in his own story. He was a
Mm,
genius and he was a genius level showman. But
mm.
we
And I
we
think
have
that that's probably one element that people would like to see, the fact that how did he buy the Beatles catalog, and how did he
it's
negotiate to get back his masters from his
yeah.
albums from Sony to
Well
stay
that
on board,
yeah,
his
that story
billion
is
dollar deal with
yeah, yeah, with the
yeah.
billion-dollar deal, which wasn't really a billion-dollar deal. That was PR. It wasn't a billion-dollar deal. The deal was that we'll give you $1 billion if the next 7 albums match the sales of Thriller, which was like a noose around his neck because they were never going to match the sales of Thriller. Just impossible because he taped on his wall for Bad 100 million, and he did pretty well as a follow up to Thriller, but it's just he just set these impossible tasks and
Yeah.
kind of went. It's like you shoot for the moon, and if you hit the stratosphere, amazing.
Mm.
But in terms of the Beatles deal, those things would have been great. It would have been great to see the Paul McCartney thing, but this is you're talking about 3 parts to a film.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
and they could easily, yeah,
yeah.
as I said, I think they could easily expand. The question, what did you make of the relation with his bodyguard,
Bill
uh,
Bray.
Bill Bray?
I love the fact that they put Bill Bray in there, and I love the fact that there was like that was highlighted because in the Jacksons you don't really get a sort of highlight of Bill Bray. I think he's there. You can see it. You can see that bucket hat.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
Bill
yeah,
Bray in
yeah,
in the
yeah.
Jackson's American
Especially
Dream.
in that the no
Yeah,
Moonwalker,
yeah,
him,
he's there, and there's another guy,
Marlon
Marvin
Brando.
Butts. Marvin Butts is there. Marvin Butts is his other bodyguard. Marvin Butts is the guy with the Jerry curl and the top hat.
Is
In the
that not
Moonwalker.
Marlon Brando's son?
No, that's Miko Brando. There's Miko
Okay.
Brando, who's Marlon Brando's son, who's in that little in that Moonwalker thing before
Yeah, yeah,
they get flattened.
yeah, yeah,
There's Bill Bray, there's Miko Brando, Marlon Brando's son, and there's a guy called Marvin Butts. He's the guy with the top hat and a Jerry curl, who
Okay.
no one really talks about. But even just that look of like, who is this guy with the top hat and a Jerry curl? That's Marvin Butts. But the Bill Bray thing is really interesting because Bill Bray was another father figure, and actually the story goes that Bill Bray stayed with him until more or less he died. Like Michael Jackson looked after him. I think there was a severance moment. There was a moment where I think he fired Bill Bray,
Wow.
and Bill Bray was there actually when they did the body examination, when they did when they wanted to corroborate the accusations and the blotches on his skin and they had to strip
Mm.
search him. Bill Bray was there, and I think he looked to Bill like Bill was trying to stop it, and Bill was like, look, Michael, there's nothing I can do. So imagine this man who's been with you since 1970, 71 as your bodyguard and has been a father figure for you and has been like one of your friends, similar to in the Last Dance documentary, like Michael Jordan's kind of retinue of kind of security detail are his friends. And there's all those
Mm.
people that you're like, oh, Michael Jordan doesn't have any friends, but he's got these older men who are his security guards. Bill Bray
Mm.
was that for Michael Jackson. And he was there. I think there was a bit of a falling out before he passed, but he paid for his funeral expenses. He had him on a stipend, all of that. But to
Yeah.
see Bill Bray highlighted
Well, I
and
guess
this
because they did want to start with the '93
the allegations,
allegations, so it probably made sense that he
yeah.
was the co-witness at
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
time.
And it would have been great to have seen that and to have that as a framing device and just to present that story because
But
there's so
with
much
that
conjecture.
story, if you think of so Anton Foucault, the story is he was hired to do Michael Jackson's training
Mhm.
day. Do a version of that kind of grittier version of the story. Would that have been as successful as the celebration, the music, the dancing?
No, we are not allowed to just have a celebration of one of the world's biggest icons who happens to be black. We're not allowed to have that. Elvis had that.
Oh, many
Um,
times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Elvis had that, but we're not allowed to just celebrate. We're not allowed. We have to. What happens a lot with us is that we get made an example. When I say us, as in black folk, we get made an example of like you can't just have joy. We have to. We're gonna give you have to self whip your biggest star because
Mm,
in front of everyone, and that's some slavery stuff. And
mm,
I'm not, look, allegations are allegations, and I don't want to be disparaging to anyone, but what I'm saying is we don't get to just celebrate our biggest stars
mm.
without giving us the option. Like, do you want to tell it? Do you not want to tell it? It's like, no, because you haven't talked to this controversy in the way that we want, it doesn't, the film is irrelevant. It's like, no, we as a family will discuss that. We as a family will discuss it.
Yeah,
We as a family will discuss it. But no, we want to celebrate our person.
yeah.
And look, look, the cynic in me says that maybe they knew that there was an NDA and all that type of stuff, and they filmed the stuff anyway in the knowledge that they'd have to remove it, because actually they could use that as a defense to say, like, guys, sorry, we filmed this stuff, but we didn't know because we weren't in charge of the
Uh,
estate at the time, so we can't actually put it in, and yada yada yada.
but that would be quite, because I mean they showed, I've seen stills of him and his mum doing missionary
Put,
work as Jehovah's Witness.
yeah. There's
Uh,
like, I've seen that, and they didn't necessarily use that stuff. But there's a cynical version of me that says that, oh, they could have done that because 20 million to $1 billion, $2 billion estate, that's nothing.
So Benson saying kind of family
No,
actions ending, stopping
Benson,
the
I get that.
family.
No. Like, Benson, I completely get that. But what I'm saying is the cynical version of me is like, this is our, let's do this. And this is a conspiracy theory, but it's like, let's do this so that we're hamstrung anyway. Because Branca had been fired just before this period of time. So Johnny Cochran was on that case. Johnny
Ah,
Cochran was on that case. So it's like, imagine you have an estate as big as Michael Jackson's. I'm talking about before he died, and you have all these things, and then I'm now back on your legal counsel after you fired me, and the previous league team didn't do a proper handover, so I don't know what's what, and things have been lost and all this type of stuff. So yeah, of course, like they were hamstrung by that NDA that was signed after that agreement. But to be fair, I think the agreement was, I think that deal was made through insurance money. Like, Michael didn't pay off of his own money. That
I
was
think
money
it was cheaper for them to
to
pay it off
settle.
and continue the Dangerous tour
Yeah, it was. I mean, the Dangerous Tour didn't even continue, but I think what happened
in
was, I
Europe.
think Michael, yeah, no, it didn't continue after that, because by '94, because there was a period, I don't know if you remember it, he came to like the Priory, like Elizabeth Taylor. I remember seeing it on GMTV as a kid. Elizabeth Taylor brought him to the Priory for like because he was addicted to painkillers at that point, because of the stress and because of obviously his burns, and that had all hit ahead. But he didn't continue the Dangerous Tour. I think that ended in Bangkok when the allegations happened. That all scuppered. But what I think is the money actually was a windfall from royalties. So I think there was an ATV windfall, like, from publishing royalties that paid for the thing. And I think his insurance company was just like, let's settle. Equally, when you do discovery for someone like Michael Jackson, the prosecution can ask for whatever. And imagine you were a master magician, a master showman. You don't want your ins and outs, particularly as Michael has sort of stated, I only ever had 2 nose jobs, and I never had my chin done, and I never had my lips done. They're gonna the prosecution will have the right to talk to Steve Hofflin, who is his first a plastic surgeon. They'll talk to Arnold Klein, who was a rival to Steve Hofflin, and allegedly is Prince's dad, whatever.
Hmm.
So you're gonna have that conversation. They can ask for whatever they want. And if someone as private as Michael Jackson is like, yo, I really don't want to go through this, so let me just pay. And that was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made, because actually there was a moment there to be like, yo, let me deal with this. But I suppose at that point in time in history, that's what you did. You settled. It's like, Michael
Yeah,
Jackson's not going
but
to court.
but unfortunately I think at that time at 93, well, so 93 started off with, he did the Oprah interview, he
He did
did
the
the
open
Super
interview, which
Bowl.
was great PR. Great PR.
Yeah.
I stayed up late to watch that, and my mum sent me to bed. She said, "We're taping it for you." Still have it on cassette tape on BBC. Yeah, the Oprah interview did crazy for him.
Yeah, but it was almost like he was being celebrated, because I remember just
Mm.
like seeing him doing the Super Bowl. he did the Oprah stuff in '93 after the Super Bowl. He um he got the Grammy Legendary Award.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was and everything at all the award shows. So it was almost like a universal acceptance of Michael.
Mm.
Then when this happened, it was almost like what at his height. He
Crashing
came.
down.
They crashed him down.
It crashed down and it never returned to what it was. And I remember when Dangerous came out. I remember getting Dangerous. I mean, I was hyped for Dangerous, but I remember seeing a thing on Newsround. You remember Newsround?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
It was on a Friday night. It came out, and it was on the advent of this is it was on the sort of eve of the album coming out, and there was also a ABC interview with Barbara. I can't remember who it was. So, it was the one where he did with Lisa Marie, and but the news round article thing was basically like, this is the album that will make or break Michael, and they were showing the big statues going through the Thames and all this type of stuff, like
Oh, is that
promotional stuff.
not yeah history?
Yeah, history.
Mm,
So that, I mean, to me, that was still Michael Mania for me in '95.
mm.
But the album History, it was cool and it had some bangers on it. But, you know,
Yeah,
you
it
had
wasn't like
History and then you had Blood on the Dance Floor, History in the mix. And when Blood on
yeah.
the Dance Floor came out in such quick succession from History, I was like, this doesn't feel like a Michael. It doesn't feel prestige enough. And
So the idea was because when Spruggs, one of Teddy's producers, they were
sure.
in the studio
Mm,
recording. I mean, he had hired out the Hit Factory.
yeah.
They were in the studio recording brand new songs.
Yeah.
They recorded some tracks, and all of a sudden, I think Sony pulled the plug on them. And they
Mm,
were trying to get Michael to do stuff like the Butterflies and go back to, but Michael was
mm.
still chasing the
He's
Janet sound.
Yeah, he's chasing
He
yeah,
was
he's
still
chasing
chasing it. But they were some of the things they recorded for Blood on the Dance Floor. He said ended up on History, ended up
mm,
in Invincible,
on Invincible, yeah.
on Invincible. Some of the stuff they were trying to do there.
Hmm.
Um, I know that they've had, and both these guys, both Mr. Savignon and Benson, are talking about that the payment was forced on him, but it
Yeah,
was the one thing he regretted was that he couldn't stop it,
yeah, yeah.
because
He
it
couldn't,
almost
yeah,
like acknowledged guilt and stuff.
yeah.
Um, so, I mean, going through the movie, if you were told to write the screenplay
Mm.
based on, okay, you can't show this and this, what would you have written differently about how compared to what the movie was? Would you do Joe the villain and Michael trying to escape under the under the shadows of his
Yeah,
wicked dad,
I
and
would.
then
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because the film is called Michael, so it's whatever angle you want to present of Michael that wasn't seen, and we haven't seen Michael the eccentric neurodivergent. He's been sort of classed as neurodivergent, but in a lot of corners, in that way that in modern times everyone loves to say, "Oh, you've got ADHD." Everyone on a weekly basis, someone will diagnose me with ADHD. You know what I mean? On a random, like, yeah, oh, you've got ADHD. So in that way that we do in modern times, where we sort of attribute neurodivergency to people, which is, an incredible. It's great that we have this openness, but like I've seen in a lot of quarters, it's come up that Michael was neurodivergent. I would say what I would love to have seen, because I'm such a huge fan of Lorenz Tate, that massive fan of his. I would have loved to have seen more of his Berry Gordy. I would love to have seen Laurie Harrier as Suzanne de Pass in that story, because Suzanne de Pass wasn't that much older than, like, say, Jackie. She was a
mm,
kid. Like, she was a kid executive,
yeah, yeah,
who was their A&R. And if there's loads of early footage, early 70s of them before that. I think they played at the Forum, and she's choreographing their routines. She's choreographing a thing that they're singing. There's a well-known footage of them singing like Zippity Doodah from the first album, and like Randy and Janet are playing Patty Cake. You know what I mean? They're
mm,
doing all
mm,
that type of
mm,
stuff,
mm.
and the brothers are rehearsing, and you're just seeing these beautiful black children just like, oh, they're playing around, and then they get into business and doing that. Suzanne de Pass was there. She was helping them with the outfits, with the visual direction, that kind of 70s hippie look that the Jacksons had with the waistcoats and the mismatched and this and that. Because incidentally, there's a performance of the Jacksons at the Hollywood Palace, which I think predates the Ed Sullivan performance, but it's the Hollywood Palace, and it's with Diana Ross and Sammy Davis Jr. is on there. And I think Catherine actually made those outfits, allegedly, those ones, which felt very in line with things that the Temptations and the Four Tops were wearing. Very kind of late 60s kind of uniformity, but the mismatched kind of vibe of the Jackson Five on the Ed Sullivan Show, Michael with the purple brim and the waistcoat, that's Suzanne de Pass. So I would have loved to have seen, to sort of dived into some of that. Vanessa Williams played her, I think, in the Jacksons An American Dream. So Suzanne de Pass was, a formidable force, and then obviously became a credible executive at Motown and MCA, and then she had the Pass Entertainment. Saying it would have been great to see more of his work ethics, his practices, and how he was dancing better than professional dancers who do that for a living while singing better than most singers. Look, we as fans, we've got really selfish, and I don't mean that in a rude way, but we've got really selfish, as in like we want our perspective to be told. Like, so in terms of me, I would have loved to see more of that 70s period, but then we also have the documentaries, which allow more time for nuance. And the documentary is a incredible format, because even though it's unscripted, it still follows, like, the filmmaker has to try and tell a story. So actually, those Spike Lee documentaries that he did, Bad 25 and Motown to Off the Wall, those are great kind of essays and loving essays about Michael the artist and the artistry. And like, even in the Bad 25 one, you get to see him with Jeffrey Daniels practicing bad, like they're in a hotel room, Michael's in the kind of thing, red shirt, and you're just seeing it. And like, Jeffrey Daniels was one of the people that taught Michael to moonwalk. In fact, he taught Michael to moonwalk. Jeffrey Daniels and Jerome Casper Candidate taught Michael to moonwalk on the Triumph Tour. They showed up at the Triumph Tour expecting that Michael was going to do the moonwalk, which obviously was the backslide, and he didn't do it. He saved it till Motown 25. So to speak of discipline, that the last person spoke, that's that discipline and that work ethic, to know that you know the moonwalk and you're going to be like, nah, I'm going to keep that for this thing 2 years later. And there was a whole controversy because Joe refuted it, that like, no one needs to teach my son how to dance and all this type of stuff. I would love to have seen some of those little bits about like the jacket that Michael wears at Motown 25. It was actually his mum's jacket. No, that was his mum's jacket. That was his mum's jacket. That was something he just took from his mum's closet. That's how the story goes. That was one of Catherine's jackets, and it just worked. It would have been great to sort of get into the lore of him and the glove.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Just picking up the single white glove.
Yeah.
How did that just become a thing?
But after he died, actually, there was this whole conversation about the rhinestone glove and why he got it done. And actually, I think part of the logic, according to this article that I read, was like, he wanted people at the back of the show who weren't up close to be able to see him. And that rhinestone, and obviously for obvious reasons, Michael liked shiny, flashy stuff. But I think there was a thing about it being like such a bright thing. So even it just created more of the magic. And if you think about Michael as an artist and someone who loved Disney and loved magic in that way, what did Mickey Mouse have? He had white gloves, which sort of plays into that sort of Disney magic kind of thing and the iconography of it. If you think about Michael, and there's so many different components of him, but Michael is the fashion guy, the guy who has so many different iconic looks and iconic eras, and this ability to borrow from history, from his military outfits with the lapels and all that type of stuff, which, to be fair, Adam Ant was doing. That was like a kind of punk, a glam kind of thing, the whole kind of military thing. Adam Ant was doing that a couple of years before, but Michael took it and made it his. If you think about the fedora and that whole look, that's Bob Fosse. You know what I mean? Bob Fosse did that. If you think about, but you don't think about Bob Fosse after that. You think about Michael Jackson. If you think about the Smooth Criminal outfit, we've seen that. That was a Fred Astaire thing. Michael took it and made it his. You think about all these iconic things, and it's like Michael was such a sponge And that's what Berry Gordy used to call him, the human sponge, because he'd
Yeah,
take things and soak them in and make them his own, you know?
I think the only doubt, and that's the thing, is because I think um, from the American Dream stuff, it showed that he actually would want to learn about everything, and
Yeah,
he was definitely taking that in.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I mean, did I thought maybe like the recreation of Thriller video. My issue was, well, unless you were telling us something that
Mm.
because you did the Thriller video, you need the video on MTV, and they don't want to because we've invested in it. But if it was like, here's the video, we this is, very
It's like we have
minute.
to show it. It's like we have to
Yeah,
show this portion. And if you think about it, it's really interesting because the previous person, I don't want to mess up the pronunciation of your name, begins with S.
Miss
Um,
Savagnon.
it's Miss Sauvignon. Comment ça va? Miss Sauvignon said about we were talking about the legality of using people's likeness and all that type of
Mm,
stuff. John Landis is mentioned. He's in the thing, in the Thriller thing, because obviously he directed it.
mm,
And Mike Jafar's like, can you? He speaks to the first AD. Can you speak to John and say that I want to get the feet? I want to get the feet in
yeah, yeah,
and all that
yeah,
type of stuff.
yeah,
But you see John Landis in there, but
yeah.
in soft focus, because I know him and Michael had problems. Um, John
That's a
Landis is
good point.
John Landis is an interesting character anyway. If you look at his history with Eddie Murphy and all that type of stuff, John Landis fell out with a lot of people, and he fell out with Hollywood at one point because someone lost their lives. Some children lost their lives on one of his sets, so that was a whole thing. But anyway, he directed Thriller, and that jacket, the iconic jacket, is his wife who designed that jacket. But he's in
Okay.
soft focus in that. And to
Yeah,
speak of
yeah,
soft
yeah.
focus again, not all the brothers gave away their rights to participate. Like Randy
No. Yeah.
is conspicuously absent, but we obviously know the politics. The fans will know the politics behind that. Obviously, his
Randy and
brother,
Jet.
yeah,
I
exactly. His
mean, I
brother,
can. Jafar is the mother of Randy's first wife. No,
no, no, no,
Randy's
no,
first.
no. Listen
Jafar's
to what
mom is.
Michael said. Listen to what Michael said. The kid is not my son. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking.
So can
Yeah,
you just imagine that
yeah.
your ex-wife's son is your brother's?
Which is just tricky. And I think Janet and Randy are super close, and I think for years there's been sort of internal strife with uh,
Jermaine.
the different factions. Yeah, and it all leads
It's
back to
mainly
Jermaine.
Jermaine. I mean, the rest of them they're cool, but Jermaine
Yeah,
steps in and
Jermaine.
out when he wants to, kind of thing.
He does, and I think look, I'd love there to be a like little kind of parody mini series called "All My Brothers," including Jermaine, because Michael Jackson has said that phrase so many times, and you know it's like there needs to be some kind of some cartoon series called "All My Brothers," including Jermaine, because you like Michael, you're not slick by saying that. That's jabs to your brother, but to speak to that, the brothers were in soft focus. You never got a moment of like, oh, Tito, what do you think? What do you think? There's even a scene where where they're talking about, nah, Jackson's, that's our Coca-Cola. That's our brand. That's our brand. We gotta, this is our Coca-Cola. And so there's that whole scene, but there's only 3 brothers on the couch. Where's the rest of the brothers? Because the 3 brothers and Catherine's there, but where's the brothers? Janet's absent from the film.
Do you think
Because
if they? I think by putting Latoya, you notice who's missing.
yeah,
Because
but Latoya
Phoebe's
needed
missing.
Latoya got paid as an exec. With all respect to Auntie Latoya, she needed the bread. She had to do it. Latoya was
If
not.
they had removed her from there, you could then focus on just the 5 brothers. Um,
Mm. Yeah, but there's so many ways to skin this proverbial cat. You could have gone up to the allegations and you could have gone up to what Latoya actually did. Because Latoya was the prodigal daughter at the point. Michael and her were so close. Like if you think about when they went to New York, which is a whole period of time that they didn't show, but I think they filmed that, but they couldn't show it. And they had to Frankenstein some of it. Like he goes to Studio 54 after the album's out. Randy wasn't paid his fees for attending the trial with Michael. Okay, cool. Thank you, Benson. Benson's the font of all knowledge. Big him up.
no, but the fact that that's why he's upset with this date. Like, look,
No, no,
I
no.
showed
But
up.
Benson's the man with money because Benson's seen it 5 times buying Rose
No,
out.
no,
I'm
I'm
like,
talking
Benson,
about Randy though. I mean,
oh,
if that
Randy,
is
okay,
the
cool, cool, cool.
case where it
Yeah.
is, yeah.
But Latoya and Michael were super close. Now the story goes, and again, this is just, I mean, it's documented, is that like they were experimenting with hydroquinones, the skin lightening creams, at the same time. Michael would get a nose job, Latoya would get a nose job. They were super close because if you think about it, Latoya Yvonne Jackson is born in 57. Michael is 58. So they're very, I think they're quite close. So
Mhm.
that New York period, there's loads of pictures of them together, rocking together. Now, what's interesting is that they were super close at one point in time. Then by the allegations time, she'd married a guy called Jack Gordon, who was also her manager. Because Latoya had some forays into music, and actually her debut album, actually, I forget the name of it, but it's got some bangers on it. For all the producers in the chat, if you want to like sample some stuff, that's got some early 80s funk that is crazy on it, crazy records. But she then released a later album, which was a reaction to both Control and to Bad. And I think the lead single was You're Gonna Get Rocked. So listen, watch that video and watch how much influence there is. There's a song called You're Gonna Get Rocked, and she's kind of rapping on it. It's terrible. Anyway, by 93, she'd been married to a guy called Jack Gordon, who was influencing her really badly. So when the allegations came out, Latoya was doing interviews. Latoya
Yeah,
was
yeah, I
in
remember seeing
Playboy.
that.
Latoya
Yeah.
was in Playboy magazine, and Catherine, a devout Jehovah's Witness, was livid. She's like, "What are you doing?" Because she was trying to get paid, and Jack Gordon had kind of coerced her to go on interviews and say that there'd been some impropriety. And I'm not, listen, love and respect to anyone who's been a victim of any horrific abuses. Like
Yeah.
my heart goes out to you, but there's a very clear thing that Latoya was doing, and she apologized. She said, "Look, I was under the influence of Jack."
Mm.
She basically came out and said like Joseph had done, done some horrific things, and then I mean horrific things outside of just the beatings.
Mm.
Um, and then Janet and everyone was like, "What the you doing? This didn't happen." But she was doing it at the time that Michael was going through it with
Mm.
with the court stuff. And I just want to just make the point of being very clear and just being like offering some compassion, because look, there's so many victims, and look, you're a psychotherapist, Nnamdi, so you deal with this, so we have to deal with it respectfully as well. And in no way am I disparaging or anything like that, but we just have to talk about it plainly, because we're talking about it plainly. But Latoya was the prodigal child of the family for a
Mm.
long time, and then by the time that Michael had passed, you see a lot of, she had a reality show, and it was her rekindling her relationship with her pops, and she was like,
Mm.
"Joseph, can I call you dad, and can I hug you?" So I make this point. We started by talking about Latoya's involvement in it. Latoya looks like she's the only sibling, because we don't see Rebe, we don't see Janet, we have no mention of Randy, and all this other siblings are in soft focus. But I go
Mm.
back to my original premise. Um, it was called Michael, so we have to singularly focus on Michael and Sauvignon. Um, the film was meant to be a flop at the outset. I don't know if the siblings and other key people who didn't want to be involved will stick to their position for part two. Look, I hope we get a part two. And big up to Gin 40. That's what I was saying. Latoya did apologize, but she did do a lot of damage, because it's like, yo, at this point, we're trying to present a united front, and also remember we're black. And as a black, in just culturally, you don't step out and talk to the press about family business.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was under the influence of like a kind of hideous don,
Mm.
Jack Gordon. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Michael now stands at 237 million at the box office. Look, let's hope it gets to a billion. Because I wonder if that's 237 million US or
No, it's
worldwide.
worldwide. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
worldwide.
let's hope it gets to a billion.
Yeah, I think it's already done about 130 in the US,
Mhm.
and it hasn't opened up in Japan yet. Um,
And they
okay.
love Michael there. They
Yeah.
love him in Japan.
They do. Just as wrapping up though,
Mm,
sequel.
mm.
What do you think is the safest option for them to do a part two?
The safest
Would they
thing is
flash? Do you think they should flash back and use those flashback images? The things pre. three bad and go back and tell that
You
story.
could do a Godfather Part 2 kind of thing. You could play with no, you could do that. You could play with time and all that type of stuff. And what's really interesting, because look, we on these chats, and I love the fact that you've had me on here, Nnamdi. I really appreciate it. I don't take it for granted, and I appreciate the chat, just hearing me ramble and have my stream of consciousness. But it's like there's a version of it where, yeah, you Godfather to it and you play with time and you jump around a little bit and you keep it safe. You keep it more of the same. You give us more of the songs and all that. But like I said, there's a version of this property which probably won't be made in our lifetime, which is called Michael Jackson: An American Tragedy. Because Michael
Mm.
Jackson has reached the level of Americana that you would find at Mel's Diner, which is in Mel's Diner, you have cutouts of Elvis and Marilyn Monroe and Frank Sinatra. Michael Jackson stands right next to those icons. So, but there's tragedy in the story. It's
Mm.
an American tragedy. It's an African American celebration and tragedy. It's a black story and then it's a pop culture story. So there's a version of it where you deal with everything, warts and all. But I don't know if it happens in our lifetime necessarily. There's also another version where you don't cast Jafar as Michael. You cast someone else
Do you
to
think that
play.
would be difficult though? Unless
It
it's
would be it
and
would be difficult, but what I'm saying is you find someone who can approximate the look of Michael in that more desperate time. I mean, Jafar was great because I always say Michael Jackson in the tragedy of his appearance changing did um if you think about the economics of it, because I'd love to do it, write a show, yeah, about Michael Jackson impersonator in like '84, who's like thriving. He's thriving. He's black and he's making loads of dough. He is thriving. And then as we get into '86, '87, Bad comes out, and he's like, "What? What's going on here?" Like we got a guy as dark as me, and he's like, "What's going on here? How's it?" And because Michael Jackson made an industry for kind of Asian Filipino impersonators and Hispanic impersonators, and like black Michael Jackson impersonators can't really thrive because at a certain point it's like it's like that guy Fabio Jackson. He's from
yeah.
Portugal. The guy's from Portugal. He's Portuguese. And he's augmented his nose and his chin, and everyone makes a joke because they're like, "You act like Michael Jackson left you in charge," and he does, he does,
Yeah.
he does.
Yeah, there's a video of him walking down a promenade and watching somebody
It's that, and he does
interpret,
that.
and he's like, "Okay, not bad, not
He does that. He does that. And it's like, Michael didn't leave you in charge, bruv. So yeah, so anyway, I make that point to say, like, yeah, you might have to kind of see how you can get one of those impersonators maybe to kind of do so. Basically, there's a clever way, there's an art house version of a sequel that you do, which deals with the kind of
But could
tragedy
they
stuff.
do the Thriller Live version of the film? Can is that a? I've not seen Thriller Live, but would
But
that almost be
I
different?
feel that's what this film is. It's the
Mm,
hits devoid of like real controversy. Because look, the most controversial aspect of it is that like Joe Jackson was a pushy, abusive father who beat his son into superstardom, effectively.
mm,
That is the crux of it.
okay.
And we
Beat
haven't
him
we
into
haven't we
superstar.
haven't found necessarily a villain to be the corporate element of Michael's orbit. The corporate element being like those folks who enabled the lawyers and managers who no, E Casanova is actually a good. Oh, E Casanova could play him. Yeah, but no. Yeah. Sorry, Benson. Sorry, excuse me. That's why I need to put this chat separately because Benson's always got good thoughts, man. Um, but no, so
But
you
if
deal with.
they couldn't go after the label execs
No, they
and
wouldn't want to skewer
Sony.
them. You wouldn't want to skewer them. But look, I as a fan, I kind of laugh at the idea that like, um, they wanted to steal the ATV catalog from Michael Jackson because they kind of did, but he
Mm,
also gave them every opportunity to do so. Because if you look at it, he was a billionaire. Sorry, he was a millionaire spending like a billionaire. So yeah, you've got the Sony ATV catalog, and at one point it was worth half. Before he died, it was worth like $500 million. But
yeah,
he had leveraged that because he'd sort of taken out a 250 million loan on that, which
yeah,
Sony with the guarantors for, and then they sold their guarantee to Fortress Capital or someone like that, and those are the sharks just waiting for you to default. So when that Martin Bashir documentary came out and he was doing his yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo, and buying all that junk, it's like, yeah, the sharks were circling because they're like, yeah, you're going to default. And so you could argue, and to the point you brought up, it's like there's a conversation about the illicit managers and mismanagement of and the yes people that orbit someone like Michael Jackson, and the kind of I don't want to name names because I don't want any defamation cats to come after me, but like there's these kind of spiritual advisors that he had around him that weren't of our culture. You have, let's say, someone like Uri Geller. It'd be interesting to see that Uri Geller story, because Uri Geller was the one who introduced him to Martin Bashir and told him that doing the Bashir interview would be a good idea. And then where is Uri Geller now? Uri Geller was the one who told Michael Jackson do that, and basically marched him towards his demise, because it's no surprise that 6 years later he was dead. That interview accelerated his demise. I'd say the Pepsi thing was one of the first sparks of that. If you think about, you've got an addiction, a drug addiction to Demerol from '84. And I kind of looked it up after that. I looked up like 84 was a big year for Michael, because that Pepsi commercial, that burn thing happened in January. It happened in January '84, I believe. Benson might correct me on the timeline. It happened in January '84, and then he was healing, but then the Grammys was February. So I'm like, Michael Jackson was at the Grammys in '84 where he swept it. You got eight gongs. He swept it, but he must have still been in pain during that period. And then a few months later, they were on the Victory Tour. So imagine going through that. You had life-changing burns, and you're doing this tour with your brothers, and the tour is like just a controversial tour because you've got the promoter Randy Sullivan, he's doing one thing, and then they get Don King, who's doing another thing, and then there's a whole ticket controversy. And then Michael gives up his whole fee because he's like, this is embarrassing. He wrote a whole thing because this young girl had written to him and said like, yo, the ticket thing is unfair, because they were making people buy blocks of tickets. It was a scam. They were making, and then when Michael Jackson found out about it, he was pissed. And he was like, I don't want to work with Don King no more. And shout out to Dion Cole. Shout out to Dion Cole for doing a great Don King. He did a great Don King. But what I would say, not in conclusion, because you and I will probably do another thing anyway, and we'll probably
we're going to do
we need a part two for this. We need a part two for this podcast. No, but we talk about what I would say is that what's great as a fan is to see the groundswell of fandom and to see everything on my timeline is like, did you realize in 1984 this happened to Michael Jackson? And everyone is mining content about it, and it's great because this geeky stuff that us nerds kind of hold dear is sort of becoming part of common parlance and common culture. But then equally, now everyone's saying like, oh, this person should have a biopic, this person should have a biopic. I would say this: not everyone is worthy of a biopic or even a TV show. Not every famous person, their story does not warrant having their life story told, because you're not Michael Jackson.
And I never thought they'll ever do a Michael Jackson. I didn't think you could
I didn't
do
think
it.
so.
I just thought it was just, his story was just too big.
Yeah.
Unless they do the part 1 to 5 and they like what they're doing with the Beatles.
With the Beatles one, but I think it's interesting because I'd love to see what numbers the Beatles one does, because I suppose it's like one film that they're just filming from 4 different perspectives. Or I mean, it's 4 films, but they're sort of, everyone is going to be featured in those films, because all of those artists, Ringo, John, Paul, and George, all have their own separate stories and journeys. But I wonder what numbers it will do, because we are so far removed. We're like 60 years removed from the wake of Beatlemania. So how relevant it is and what kind of magnitude it will hit up is interesting. And again, I wonder if Michael will be featured in Paul's film. You know what I mean? Like in the Paul film, you know what I mean? Because that whole kind of thing of like, yo, this kid who I gave the information about buying songs, he just ganked me for my publishing. And then Paul at some point asked Michael for a raise. on his royalty rate. He came to him after the sale in 88 and he was like, "Oh, Michael, we bought these songs. We made these songs when we were kids and we just thought songs belong to everyone." And that's my terrible Scouse accent. And then he said that he went to, apparently Paul's lawyers went to John Branker and them and said like, "Oh yeah, Michael said he's agreed a royalty rate increase." And then Branker went to Michael like, "Did you agree a royalty rate increase?" He's like, "No." Like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? He's like, "While we're at it, go and license some songs. Let's run this thing like a business, Branker." Like Michael Jackson was cold with it as a businessman, and that's the joy of Michael. The
But that's what I
dichotomy,
wanted to say. I want
yeah,
we want to see the
yeah,
businessman, the man
the
who wanted to buy Marvel, and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the dichotomy of this Peter Pan like figure, which I think was an act, and then this stone cold businessman and this student of James Brown and Jackie Wilson and Fred Astaire. Anyway,
Mm.
Michael's a fascinating conversation. He's one of the most interesting people, one of the most interesting people that has ever lived. Facts.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone we appreciate. I mean, yeah, as I said, your chats are rolling through, um, and yeah, we are going to come back at a later date to review the Off the Wall album. I would say from the movie, the one part that really touched me, that I do wonder the trajectory of his career and his life, was that Pepsi commercial, the
Oh
fire,
yeah.
the severity of what it looked like. It didn't, and I'm thinking, when you have a megastar, I mean, can you imagine anyone on set and a megastar getting injured like that? It just seemed like, my goodness, health and safety back in the day. But
Mm,
what did that do? Because was that the trigger for the humanitarian work that he did? And did that just change his priorities? What happened? What was the outcome with that? So you could have done a film just
yeah.
fire, and then what happens to Michael after that? And
Yeah,
uh,
there's so, like you say, there's so many ways to skin the cat, and actually that will be the joy, is like um seeing the reinvigoration of the estate, and seeing, because I think the estate's been run excellently. Personally, as an observer of it, you took something that was in the red and put it in the black
mm.
metaphor. you know you put something that was in the red, put it back in the black, and actually just keep running it, and introduce it to new audiences. But yeah, there's so many ways
And
to
just on that though, does Jafar have a career in acting, or is he just that's it, your forever Michael?
it's
And
so I think it's like this. I think it's like the actor that played Tupac, Demetrius Shipp. It's a really tricky one, because so there's a few things. I've been watching a lot of Michael auditions, actors sending out auditions for this was me, this is my audition for Michael. And I want to say to casting directors, please don't do that. You knew you were going to cast Jafar. Why are you wasting actors' time? Don't do that. No, I genuinely think it's a really hideous thing to do. I genuinely think, and casting directors will hate me for saying this, but I just think it's a hideous thing to do for actors. You knew that Jafar was going to be in the thing because you were training him and giving him acting lessons 2 years prior. Now all these young actors, bless them, are just putting out like, "Oh man, I'm coming up for the Michael Jackson role." Jermaine, because Jermaine is very good at this. Jermaine put his son, Jermaine Jackson Jr., in the Jackson's American Dream. Jermaine's a producer. He's going to angle for his son, just like Ice Cube angled for O'Shea Jackson Jr. in the NWA film, and did an amazing job. But I think it's a waste of actors' time,
when you're up
personally.
against Your Majesty,
Yeah, or Your Majesty Jafar. Narcissist much, Jermaine? Narcissist much, Your Majesty Jafar? Uh, Jacaranda?
oh,
Jasmine
good.
D. No. So, do I think Jafar has a career? Look, I hope he does, and look, he did an amazing job. But some things are so some people are going to be so indelibly and inextricably linked to that role they played. Like Demetrius Shipp, I didn't love the performance of Tupac. I didn't love the Tupac film, but he looked like him. So I think that was the sell. That was the real boon for that film. But he hasn't worked like post that. So it
Okay.
sort of goes to show that like some people either have the chops or they don't. Jafar, as his uncle, phenomenal job in a version of Michael to screen, because I still love Wiley Draper. I still love Jason Weaver. Like Jason Weaver must be
Oh,
nuts.
good, no, good.
I'm such a Jason Weaver fan. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah, but you
Um,
think, because we think about the American Dream stuff. I
mm.
mean, I loved watching the New Edition biopic, and
Oh,
and I
that's
love
number
watching.
two. That's number two for me. New Edition is
But
number two. Shout out to Algie Smith, man. Oh,
and then the other one was the Temptations. They did I
oh
don't
yeah,
know if you,
with
yeah.
with Leon,
Yeah,
with Leon.
so
Yeah,
so the Temptations biopic was probably one of
nobody came to see you, Otis.
yeah, it is probably one of my all-time favorite movies, the Temptations biopic. But they had time to go through the story and
Yeah,
and
and
stuff.
yeah.
I think in the movie it was done on TV and you had the hours to do it. To do a movie like this, I mean, as I said, 2 hours went by so quickly.
It went by so quickly because there's so much story that you can get through. But also, I think, reading about it, the TV series was Michael's, him signing off on it was a concession to the family to be like, yo, get some money. This is the last time you're going to get paid for me. Because I think Michael has always valued cinema and the cinematic aspect of stuff. And Michael was always seen as a cinematic level artist. I think New Edition's story lent itself to TV because
Yeah,
while they're big culturally, they're not. If you do a New Edition film, it's not going to do numbers. No offense to New Edition, but it just isn't because I don't
yeah,
think they had a splash, the same kind of splash as Michael. I think the New Edition story is one. I put it next to the Jacksons in terms of it was so brilliant. BT did an incredible job. All the actors killed
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But yeah, so we'll see, man. We'll see.
Mm.
But yeah, we got to do a look. What's the point of doing an off the wall thing, really? Because what can you say about one of the greatest albums ever made? But I'll do it. I'll do it for cultural purposes. You know what I mean? It's one of my. It's next to Dangerous. Is like my favorite Michael album. I think it's like my favorite. Just because it's his first. It's some of the greatest vocal production that's been done on him ever. It's some of the greatest production, state of the art production at the time for him. I saw Ebro from formerly of Hot 97, say that Thriller was like a McDonald's album, and he's getting a lot of flack for it. But I know what he means, as in like it's a pop culture item. For mass pop culture consumption versus Off the Wall felt like still a very black album and still like for us. And when Michael was we still had that cultural connectivity and exclusivity on Michael and the Jacksons, but by Thriller Time, he was just a juggernaut. He was for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, Off
And
the
I
Wall.
do wonder, yeah, you do, yeah, you do wonder if, I mean, he's fortunate that he had all those band albums and other solo albums
Yeah, yeah.
before they did Off the Wall, which was massive, 10 million before you do Thriller. So you
Mhm,
can almost say you're going up, but then you get to Thriller. I mean, maybe if Bad was that big album or so.
mhm.
But yeah, you just can't rewrite history and
You
stuff.
can't rewrite history, but we have Off the Wall as a thing, and that will always live. And it was a time just before it got crazy, so it'd be good to talk about it. It's a time before it really got crazy, and it was like you're watching a 20-year-old Sunset Driver. My friend Francis Ezekiel always talks about Sunset Driver, and sorry, Benson, I hate that song. I hate it. I remember getting Michael Jackson the Ultimate Collection. My girlfriend at the time got it for me for my birthday in '04. The kind of collection. It's like a little book. It came with a black book and all
Okay,
that.
yeah,
The Ultimate Collection, and I remember hearing Sunset Driver for the first time because it had so many great demos. It had demos that were written by Trey Lawrence and all these people, but it had that Sunset Driver, which I'd always heard about. I was like, yeah, I don't like it. But you know what? Just for cultural purposes, I'm going to listen to it now. When we get off the phone, I'm going to be like, all right, cool, listen to Sunset Driver. Let me cue it up, in fact. But
yeah,
so I'm controversial, not controversial in that I hate Michael's Castaways. I really hate the songs that didn't come out because I think whereas like Prince, his B-sides are like just as good as stuff. So not even his B-sides, but his offcuts, the things that
mhm,
were on a cutting room floor or whole albums that he discarded, like things like the Black Album that he discarded. They were just as good as his released albums. Michael's offcuts, no. His
Yeah.
Motown offcuts are great. His Motown offcuts are great. So if you listen to albums like Boogie or Joyful Jukebox Music, which were like the offcuts of Motown, great, 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 great. But the stuff that he did, the offcuts from Thriller, like Nightline and Got the Hots, they just sound like trash. They just sound like 80s, like just sort of prototypical 80s stuff. They don't sound classic. It's like I remember being in Paris, Flex. I remember being in Paris in like maybe like last year at some point. I remember like being like, oh, they just leaked the Lady in My Life, like 7-minute version with like different verses, and I'd never heard it before. And I was like, even this 7-minute version is crazy. Lady in My Life is a crazy song, but here's the thing: of the songs that Michael wrote for Thriller that that made the cut,
Mm.
even the girl, I think even The Girl Is Mine is great, even though people don't like it. Beat It is great, but that's because Quincy set him homework. Quincy set him homework of like, give me a version of My Sharona. As a side note, that's what I also I liked, but I didn't like from the film, the whole Beat It kind of narrative. But anyway, let me not get crazy about it. But Rod Temperton like was the nitrous oxide for that, for both Off the Wall and for Thriller. And his writing and his pen game and the arrangements that they came up with for Michael were just superb. And so to my point, like songs like Sunset Driver, which Michael had written by himself, they're cool, but they don't feel like, oh, this would have been this would have edged out Working Day and Night, or this would have edged out I Can't Help It, you know.
Circus Girl
Um,
should have been replaced by the Girls' Mother. Yeah, I mean, I will. Yeah,
oh, you
I
mean
mean,
Carousel? Carousel. That was
Carousel.
yeah,
Yeah.
that Carousel. Yeah, Carousel. Carousel is a beautiful song, man. But it's like you either get Human Nature or you get Carousel. You can't have both those flavors.
No, he says Circus Girl. Oh, okay.
Oh no, it's called. It's called. It's. I think it was called Carousel or Circus Girl. I think they call it both. But like, um,
Okay.
I lost my heart to a circus girl on the carousel. That's what. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
On the carousel to the circus, to a circus girl. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
I mean, so guys, I mean, we appreciate everyone who joined through and listened up, and someone put your hand out, was supposed to be on the Dangerous album.
Mm.
They agreed. If you saw the video of him and Bruce Swedien, they said, okay, we're going to put these songs this order, and then they just decided to put in. Yeah, we've talked about it. I would have removed "Keep the Faith," and I probably would have removed.
Don't tell Francis. Don't tell my friend Francis Ezekiel that he'll come for all of us. It's his
Because you
favorite
can't
song.
have "Will You Be There" and "Keep the Faith."
That's what I
You having
said.
two,
That's what I said. You
and
get
then
one
you
or the other.
probably, as much as I like the what's the name of the film, the song for the boy who died of
Will you
AIDS,
be? Oh, Gone Too Soon.
"Gone Too
Ryan
Soon."
White.
As
Ryan
beautiful as the
White.
song was, I would have just taken out
I
the album.
disagree. I disagree. You got to keep that. Listen, you got. I disagree. I disagree. I disagree. That's
Oh,
say
you
over
take
Sutton.
away "Heal the World."
Yeah, you get one of those. You get one of those, but I think Gone Too Soon needs to exist. But also, it needs to exist so that when Usher sings it at the funeral, it hits you a certain way. Because the reason why that song hits so nicely at the funeral, as morbid as that sounds, and like I was in floods of tears, is because of the resonance of it. It's a song that Michael sang for Ryan White, who died of AIDS in '92, and who he'd known, and then we see him sing the same song. Oh, see, we see Usher sing the same song for his own idol at his idol's funeral. So the
Mm.
symmetry and the kind of storytelling in that is like incredible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, understandable. I mean, that we've only gone for that debate for that album, but as I said, we will. I mean, AK is in LA at the moment, but when he gets back to the UK, we are going to look at the Off the Wall. But it's been great. I mean, please go continue to support the Michael movie.
Yeah.
It is it's amazing to see how maybe the negative reviews actually galvanize the community. Say we're gonna go regardless of what you said, because if those reviews had made the film debut at like 20 million or 15 million, they wouldn't even think about it. It would have been just a disaster. But
Mm.
yes, yes.
I mean, people would hoped it would be a disaster, but like, look, what is really clear is Michael Jackson is loved.
Yeah, yeah. After all these
Yeah.
years, he's still loved, appreciated, and admired. Guys, we appreciate you guys. As I said, AK will be back off the wall. But yes, take care, guys, and check out. Okay, do you want to tell them where they can find your music?
Uh, Google my. I'm sorry, I should be speaking proper English. Go to all the DSPs. It's just my government name, Akemji, Akemnji. I put out songs every now and then. Some stuff in my archive, stuff that I'm writing at the moment, and it's good stuff. Good R&B, modern R&B with like a kind of retro leaning thing, and my pen game's incredible. So go listen to that. I produce all the music, so go listen to that. And we've got Black Ops, which is out on all streaming platforms in the UK. It's on Hulu in the US. We also have Famalam. I'm also in the Ballad of Wallace Island with Kerry Mulligan that came out last year. What else? Queen's Gambit on Netflix. What else? There's stuff. Google me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone, we appreciate everyone joining in,
Thank you,
and
man.
we will catch you guys at another date. So
Yeah.
everyone,
Thank you,
take.
guys, and thank you for allowing me to ramble. This is therapeutic. Thank you.
Go watch Michael and celebrate his story.
Love.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of Halftime Chat. Please remember to subscribe, share, and comment. But most importantly, why don't you become a member of Halftime Chat? We've got amazing videos, amazing perks, and being able to support the channel. But anyway, thanks for watching. Take care.
I never participated in that category.
And somewhere in between
us for even loving us, on which I did miss you really.
What was it like growing up?